Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you. That's depending where you are in the world. We're here live in London doing our nighttime devotion. The devotional is called Conflict and Courage. The title today, Four Boys in Babylon. The scripture reading comes from Daniel 1 verse 17. As for these four children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. Daniel and his companions enjoyed the benefits of correct training and education in early life, but these advantages alone would not have made them what they were. The time came when they must act for themselves, when their future depended upon their own course. Then they decided to be true to the lessons given them in childhood. What a life work was that of these noble Hebrews. As they bade farewell to their childhood home, how little did they dream of their high destiny. Faithful and steadfast, they yielded themselves to the divine guiding so that through them God could fulfill his purpose. Daniel and his companions in Babylon were, in their youth, apparently more favored of fortune than was Joseph in the earlier years of his life in Egypt. Yet they were subjected to tests of character scarcely less severe. From the comparative simplicity of their Judean home, these youth of royal line were transported to the most magnificent of cities, to the court of its greatest monarch, and were singled out to be trained for the king's special service. Strong were the temptations surrounding them in that corrupt and luxurious court. The direction that their food should be supplied from the royal table was an expression both of the king's favour and of his solicitude for their welfare. But a portion having been offered to idols, the food from the king's table was consecrated to idolatry. And in partaking of the king's bounty, these youth would be regarded as uniting in his homage to false gods. The history of Daniel and his youthful companions has been regarded on the pages of the inspired word for the benefit of the youth of all succeeding ages. Through the record of their fidelity to the principles of temperance, God is speaking today to young men and to young women, bidding them gather up the precious rays of light that he's given on the subject of Christian temperance and place themselves in right relation to the laws of health. So we're looking at Daniel and the four Hebrew boys, or Daniel and the three Hebrew boys. They were young, they were well taught as young men. And when they were captured and taken to Babylon, it was recognized of their knowledge, of their wisdom. And also they stood for their God and they stood by their God. Also where it comes to the food, they recognized the food was offered to idols before the king ate. So therefore the king was eating food offered for idolatry, and they recognized this, and this is why this isn't only why they didn't eat it, but this was the main reason why they didn't eat it. I don't know if they didn't eat meat at all, But I do know that they mainly ate pulses and lentils and vegetables while they were there. And this paid dividends, obviously, because they were favored. God stood by them. God elevated them because they stood for him. It's not, a lot of this is object lessons as to what you should do, what you shouldn't do, etc. Yes, in most cases, you shouldn't really be eating meat. Our bodies weren't made to eat meat. But after the flood, obviously there was nothing to eat other than meat, and that's why Noah saved all of those animals. Some were clean, some were unclean. But then we had to get back to Eden, as it were, when where we go eating without meat. And it helps our mind, it helps our thinking, and it helps our digesting, it helps everything in our bodies. And this is why Daniel and the 3 Hebrew boys were favored, because their wisdom, their intellect was way above the local guys in Babylon, because they didn't eat the same. They didn't have the same diet. Their diet was far superior, and it helped them in their mind and their bodies, and they could think more clearly. Their intellect was far better. And as the scripture said, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. He favored them because they stood for God. And this is what we should do, stand for God, and he will certainly help us and be with us.